Hey guys, Pedro here to tell you about the latest from Jinjer, Duél, out February 7th on Napalm Records. The album has 11 tracks, 42 minutes in length, and this is the band's 5th full-length studio album. They are a Ukrainian progressive metal band. When I look at the design of this record, I find that this album understands what it has in hand, understands the dynamic of the individual songs, and also understands the danger of not placing them correctly as far as the track listing is concerned and allowing the album overall to feel very linear. That would kill the record because this album has a consistent sense of heaviness, both musically and vocally, from beginning all the way to the end. It's perhaps one of their heaviest albums as far as that consistency is concerned. So when you have an album that has this sort of characteristic in the forefront, an album that you can immediately say that's a heavy record, it's very easy to fall prey to that heaviness and not necessarily give a chance for the listener to see all the nuances and all the differences and uniquenesses that each song puts together. So the way they structure this album allows you to have the right ebbs and flows at the right time, so that you're not only seeing that common sense of heaviness that consistently is provided across all 11 songs, you're also seeing the different textures that each track has, their own unique fingerprints, what they can offer, the different individual journeys that they have for the listener. This makes the overall experience a lot better. It makes a more fluid, a more dynamic, a more engaging album, a fresher record that you don't feel overburdened by it. When you get to the end of it, you're ready to come back again to the beginning. And it also makes the individual songs sound even better when you listen to them in the context of this record. As far as the sound is concerned, I already mentioned the consistent heaviness of the album. It almost feels at times like a straight up death metal record. That is the type of heaviness that you're going to get here. And if there are two genres that impact this album, it's definitely the progressive one and the death metal one. Those two elements predominantly combine themselves to create the overall soundscape of this record. Obviously, there are other elements at play. Grooviness has always been a key factor for Jinjer Records, so grooviness is still going to be there. Some gent elements are still there, some new metal elements are still there. So there's all of these different influences, all of these different sounds, all of these different ideas that are still present, that have always been part of the Jinjer DNA, and this album is not going to change that. What this album does is that it emphasizes perhaps two of the more predominant elements that always been there as well, the death metal side of the band and the progressive side of the band. So this album, from a production standpoint, allows the record to be a Jinjer record because it still feels like a Jinjer album. It's just that it has that heavier connotation to it, both musically and vocally, partnering up really well in order to also offer perhaps a more straightforward, I hate to use that word, but straightforward lyrical content. It still has a lot of metaphors. It's still a very poetic, lyrically sounding album, but I felt like the poetry on this record was a little bit easier for me to reach, was a little bit easier for me to connect with at first glance. It's an album that doesn't hide itself from a lyrical standpoint as much as some of the previous records did, specifically Wallflowers. This one is a little bit more naked, is a little bit more naive from that point of view, and I think that also impacts or is a direct result of that more straightforward death metal heaviness that the album has. And like I said, the production does a great job on this album because the heaviness of the record doesn't undermine any of the other individual characteristics of the band. When you look at this record, you see the heaviness on the guitars predominantly. That doesn't mean that there's not any groovier moments, any groovier riffs, because they're going to be there. But predominantly, you're going to find a more chuggier, thicker, heavier, with a slight more distortion in order to really emphasize that roughness coming out of the guitars to give that sense of heaviness consistently from that standpoint. And then you have the variations that bring in a little bit more groove that fall into a more melodic aspect. In the melodic side of the sound, you have the bass coming in and having its own room to shine, having its own ability to dissect the song and bring that prog influence into the forefront. In the heavier side of the song, the bass matches a little bit more with the heaviness that's been given by the guitars. The two work more in parallel with one another or in unison with one another, allowing themselves to give more room for the guitars to breathe in those portions, and then separating themselves a little bit more significantly in the more melodic pieces, in the more proggy technical pieces, and in those parts giving the bass a little bit more room to breathe. So it's almost like a tag team between the two. And then in between them you have the drums, not sonically in between them, but in between those two contrasts, or these two fighting forces, you have the drums. I feel like the drums on this album is the most versatile of elements, because it morphs to what the needs are. When the song is heavier, the drums also sound heavier. When the song is a little bit more technical, a little bit more proggy, the drums also sound a little bit more technical, a little bit more proggy. So it's a very versatile element that emphasizes the two sides of the coin. If there's ever been an album that had an incredible yin and yang, well defined throughout each and every single song, it's definitely this record. Now when it comes to the vocals, this is a much heavier album, like I mentioned before. Vocally, a lot more harsh vocals on this record than when it comes to clean vocals. Wallflowers was the complete opposite. There was a lot more clean vocals on that record than harsh vocals. This one takes a different approach. But I feel like this is a result of everything that led into this album. If you look at the sound, if you look at the lyrical content, it seems like everything is a little bit more streamlined. Everything is a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more organic, a little bit more personal. Not that previous records weren't, but this one is almost like you're just taking the gloves off. You know, it just has that feel. It just has this sense of intensity, this sense of aggression that's bubbling. And I think when you have an album that has that sort of mindset going into it, going with a more heavier, harsher sounding vocal style, it just makes sense. And it allows the songs to have a different impact. And then you're using the clean vocals to really break and create some dynamic movements within the vocal performance and help ease some of the pieces of the songs that, if they were just harsh vocals from beginning to end, would overwhelm the listener, and you would not be able to dive deeper into the lyrical content and to the emotions that comes with that same lyrical content. So it's a very interesting record all around. It really showcases everyone's strengths. I think it allows us to see the band at its best, with every single member having an opportunity to really showcase what they can do. And I don't think we've seen an album from Jinjer with these characteristics, where everybody had a chance to really showcase their talents on an individual basis within the context of the collective. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Tantrum. This is the opening track on the album. It's heavy, it's driven, both musically and vocally. It has that usual Jinjer grooviness that's a fingerprint of the band, and then you moving into a more bass prog lead as far as the chorus is concerned, with clean vocals that add to that progginess, that add to that melody. And this allows the album to have a heavier, straightforward verses a more technical, proggy, melodic chorus. A complete dynamical change between these two, but somehow connecting really well and bridging the two really well throughout the song. There's a little bit of a bass bridge that leads you to the end of the track. That's phenomenal. The bass comes in on its own. You get that technicality coming through, you get that progginess coming through, you get that grooviness coming through. Then the drums add themselves as a layer underneath the bass. Finally the guitars come in, then the vocals come in, and the vocals come in with clean vocals, because it feels like everything been set up to that clean vocal performance to come in, and it's emotionally charged. The song really finishes on an emotionally charged note, and it builds itself all the way to the end in that manner. And when you look at the title of the song, Tantrum, the song is kind of designed like a tantrum in terms of how the chorus and the verses, the dynamic between the two work. Next we have Tumbleweed. Very interesting guitar sound for this song. That thickness, that distortion that I mentioned earlier from the guitars, it's really noticeable on this track. And what's also really noticeable on this track is how the bass underlines it really well, almost emphasizing it even more. And then you have the drums that support the whole structure, allowing you to have the clean vocals that kind of navigate through it. And this track has one of the catchiest guitar riffs of the album. I just love the guitar sound. I just love the main guitar riff on this track. It's memorable on its own. It almost doesn't need anything else. Just listening to it, it magnetizes you. It's just the repetition that it has, really feeling like a tumbleweed rolling through your head as you're listening to it. It's a great song from that standpoint, and altogether it's a heavy track but still feeling very controlled, very condensed in the way it's put together. The chorus feeling even more intense with more sound, bigger vocals. It's just a track that knows how to get bigger, but using the clean vocals to minimize that growth, or to create a more balanced approach to that same sonic growth and that heavier sound as far as it grows from verses going into chorus. And then you sprinkle in some harsh vocals just to emphasize the overall heaviness of the song. I don't think the track really needed it because it's a heavy song. It feels heavy, sounds heavy, it's emotionally heavy, but you're gonna get a piece of those harsh vocals that come in. And just in case you thought the song was getting too soft because of the predominance of clean vocals, they emphasize the fact that this is not a soft song, this is a heavy track. Last but definitely not least, Dark Bile. I love the build-up that this track has from the beginning. It increases in sound, it increases in presence, it intensifies as it rises, as it moves. The mix of clean vocals and harsh vocals add violence to the song, because anytime you have that disparity in the two approaches, you're making the song feel a lot more aggressive, because you can be aggressive and intense with a clean range, and she is very intense with her clean range, and then the harsher side of her vocals bring in that intensity but transform it into aggression. That's how this song is put together as far as the vocals are concerned. But the sound behind it, it's not that far apart. It has the same attributes, it has the same dynamics, and one emphasizes the other. This is it. Jinjer with Duél, out February 7th on Napalm Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Hit me up in the comment section. I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.